Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode of New Album Spotlight, the show where I put the spotlight on a new album in progressive rock or related genre that I think fans of the same music as me will also enjoy. Today I have one that's a little bit off the beaten path perhaps, not your typical classic prog that I tend to talk about. But an art pop band that I just think is fantastic, has a great string of records behind them, and this one is another solid entry into their catalog. This is Bent Knee, and their new album is called 20 Pills Without Water. They're a band that was formed in 2009 in Boston, Massachusetts in the US. Fantastic group of musicians that play this kind of quirky style, quirky pop music with a little bit of prog influences, so I think they appeal a lot to a prog audience. The first album that I was aware of really in a big way was Say So in 2016, which I think is an excellent one from them. A lot of people point to the previous album, Shiny Eyed Babies, as a great entry point as well. Really solid record. But I got into them with Say So. I loved Land Animal and You Know What They Mean, which were the next two subsequent records, which I thought had a really cool style, has some hard-hitting moments, some dreamy pop kind of stuff mixed in, but just really have their own creative, unique stamp on the genre, which is what drew me to them in the first place, that they don't sound really like anyone else. And they had a bit of a misstep in my eyes with Frosting, which was their previous album in 2021, an album that I had a really hard time getting into, and I think a lot of people did. Had a lot of like auto-tuned lyrics, really leaned heavy in like synth pop direction, seemed to sacrifice some of the quirky, more proggy bits that they had been known for in their past albums. So I think it was met with kind of a mixed response, especially in the prog community. I know there's people who champion it and love it, and as I've talked about in a recent rant, I'd never say that it's terrible. I think there's something good there, and I really respect those who love that record. It just wasn't really to my taste when it came out. But this one kind of rights the ship for me, at least in terms of my taste and what they do. I think this is an excellent record, 20 Pills Without Water. They went through a bit of a lineup change before this album came out. Two of their main members left the group, Ben Levin, who was their guitarist, and bassist Jessica Keon. So they're gone, so we're now slimmed down to basically a four-piece here, which is Courtney Swain on lead vocals, keyboards, and bass, Gavin Wallace Ellsworth on drums, Chris Baum on violin, backing vocals, and guitar, and Vince Welch on synthesizers, rhythm guitar, bass, sound design, and production. So really great stuff from this group, this iteration of the band. I really love their art pop style, where it's catchy and full of hooks, but they always do something unique and off-kilter that makes it their own sound and unlike anything else you hear in the pop landscape. So I appreciate them for bringing that to the table. One of the interesting things about this record, there's a few kind of interstitial interlude style tracks that I'm not really a big fan of. Enter is the first one, which brings this kind of building atmospheric sound with this light chatter in the background of, you know, I don't know if it's them with fans or something like that in the backing. So that's kind of the first entrance of the music, which to me is just kind of an intro into Forest, and I don't know if it needed to be on its own as a track. Cowboy is probably the one big miss for me, at least in my taste. It's a song with strum guitar and silly, buried, countrified vocals, some ambient noise and atmospherics towards the end, kind of a throwaway track that doesn't really give me much. To me, I count this as kind of like the intermission of the album. It's exactly in the halfway point, and it doesn't really add much to me to the album at all. Maybe people like the quirkiness and different kind of taste that this brings to the album, but for me it just wasn't really working. Comet is another shorter atmospheric track, which I think works well in tandem with Drowning, but I don't understand why it wasn't just part of the song Drowning. And then of course there's kind of the final track, Exit, which is basically just atmospherics to kind of take you out of the landscape of the album, which I actually enjoy quite a bit. I think it's a good way to finish the record, but once again, could it have been tacked on to the previous track as just part of the same track? I don't know. But that leaves us with about 8 main tracks to talk about on the record, and they're all great in their own ways. I found a lot to enjoy with everything here. To me, one of the greatest aspects of the group is Courtney Swain and her vocals. vocals. She's such a unique talent. Her vocals are excellent and over the top, but in the best kind of ways. She's able to have this fragility at times. She's able to stretch to the very peaks of her voice at others. She just really is able to explore a wide range and has a lot of expressiveness in the vocals. I think that's really what's important to me, is she really has an expressive quality that showcases different nuance to her sound and brings a quirky edge to the music that really, to me, is the signature style of Bitney. Without her vocal work, I don't think it would work. So fantastic. And she has lots of moments here to shine. One in particular on Big Bago Manifesto, which is a sensational track in the middle of the album with this beautiful lush sonic soundscape and these dreamy qualities to it. But we get these like operatic style vocals that are just brilliant, technically amazing, and just beautiful to listen to. There's some chanted pop vocals around it, but her spotlighted vocals are just on another level there. And I love her vocals on Forest, the opening track after that ambient interlude at the beginning. Big pounding drums here, textured synths, but Courtney's unique timbre over the top of it, and it builds into this kind of wall of sound. Really great, glorious sonic build-up here. I love the textures that they play with, that they're building these walls of sound that just are massive and so enjoyable to listen to, and that get exciting as it builds and builds upon itself. There's a couple tracks that lean more into like this 80s synth pop kind of style that they are getting into in this record. I think I Like It has that a bit with these electronica elements. They use strings to their great effect to kind of build out the sound, but it still has that kind of 80s pop synth catchiness added to their off-kilter vibe. Illiterate has a wonderful bouncy poppy feel, but it's definitely off-kilter and different. And to me, this is the best showcase for their talent of bringing this catchy pop track that I think anyone could just enjoy listening to. But when you really dive into it, it's very complex, very interesting, off-kilter, and unique in their own style. And I think the way they're able to perform that magic trick of having something insanely catchy and poppy, but at the same time really complex and interesting and intricate, is just a really great superpower to have that I really love. I think Never Coming Home is another great glitchy pop kind of song as well, with some dreamy qualities, some funky drum beats and bass work, some lush strings adding some texture to the arrangement. Wonderful track, one of the singles that came out in advance of the album, I believe. And the final track, DLWTSB, has a nice 80s throwback with some well-placed synths and has a very laid-back and groovy poppy sound to it. It picks up the pace in the middle with some great drums and bass and leads to these kind of big 80s synth sounds. Some really great pop moments that I really enjoy and think are excellent and really add a lot of texture and fun to the album. Drowning is another focus for Courtney's vocals, a sparse drum beat, fluid bass lines, some atmospheric strings and light keys surround what is really the centerpiece to me, which is Courtney's vocal performance, which is just really gorgeous and beautifully done. Lawnmower is also a great chance for Courtney's vocals to shine. I feel like this one really leans into more of a modern indie pop aesthetic, similar to what you'd hear from an artist like Phoebe Bridgers, with a really kind of sparse arrangement at the start, just focused on vocals, and it builds throughout the end and comes to this kind of dramatic conclusion. A really great track and has a great modern pop sensibility that I think that could be a hit if it ended up in the right circles, and has that kind of feel that I think is really fresh sounding in the modern pop landscape. So a beautiful record. Like I said, it leans a lot on these pop aesthetics, some catchy hooks, some fun beats, some synth work that reminds me of 80s pop. But they bring their own quirky bent to it. There's a lot of quirky instrumentation. There's some cool strings that are playing here and there. They have some electronica elements. Courtney's vocals are just incredibly unique and showcase a lot of nuance and a lot of skill, but also a unique style that's unlike anyone else that I've heard in the modern music landscape. So it's a record well worth checking out if you're willing to jump into more of a pop aesthetic, if you're not just stuck into like the 70s prog. I think it's worth your attention. I am a secret lover of modern pop music. I like a lot of modern pop. I don't talk about it on the channel because I feel like I've created a lane for myself in the prog world. So I love when these two worlds collide and you get a bit of a proggy pop album. That's one of my favorite things to discover and to talk about. And that's where I feel like Bitney converged in the prog world and the pop world coming together to create something truly unique and fresh sounding and modern and beautiful, and what I think modern music should be like across the board. If it were a perfect world and I was able to decide what the mainstream music was, it would be a lot like this. Very well worth your time and checking out. So thank you guys for joining me. Hopefully you appreciate this review, and I'll hopefully catch you guys in future episodes. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.